Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Oto Gomes Crypto Show. I'm your host, Oto Gomes. Today, we have a special guest. I know you guys love it when I say that. A very special guest. His name is Justin Leslie. He's a dedicated scientist and courageous whistleblower. Graduating cum laude in biomedical sciences, he worked at Pfizer during the CV-19 pandemic and uncovered critical issues in the poke rollout. Got to keep my platform clean with these words. His revelations led to the creation of the documentary Project Whistleblower, and he now advocates for transparency and holistic health through his Just Integrity Network. Join us as Justin shares his remarkable journey and insights on the episode today. Justin, how are you, my friend?
Otto, good to see you again. Thanks for having me on. We got to meet at Music and Sky, which was super cool. So, it's good that community is able to connect us.
Absolutely, man. That was a great experience. I've been to a lot of events and conferences, and that's the first time that I felt at home at a conference, like at an event where I was like, oh, this is what it can look like. This is what it can feel like when you're, heart-based and people are interdependent and they're self-accountable, and we can actually talk about the hard stuff. So it was really nice to meet you there and give you a nice big hug for everything you're doing.
Matt, Mike, and Owen, shout out to them. It's a conference, it's an event. You call it a festival, you call it a concert, right? I mean, it's all of those in one. So it's awesome. So I was happy to go, happy to meet you there this year. And so let's get into it, my friend. We'll dive deep into what I've been up to over the last three and a half years. And my bio doesn't really explain that I was also working at Project Veritas and O'Keefe Media Group, but we'll also be getting into that and the alternative media world. And, we can also touch on crypto, as obviously the show is about crypto as well.
It will happen. It has to happen because it's called the Oto Gomes Crypto Show.
Yes, sir.
So yes, I definitely want to use this opportunity to get to know you and your journey and how you got to this point. One of the first questions I always like to ask is, what was your red pill moment? Like, what was the moment that you were shook by everything you're experiencing and it kind of broke you out of that matrix that we like to call it?
Great question. And I'll start where in my documentary, I start off basically saying that I graduated from University of Rhode Island in biomedical sciences, and I was in a master's program at Rutgers University. My awakening process was definitely a gradual one, but it escalated because of, this scamdemic that we were all fed by the mainstream media and alternative media, et cetera. So in my master's program at Rutgers, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 students that were really questioning the narrative, the overarching narrative. I wasn't buying into it. And it was a gradual thing for me because in my bachelor's program, I had to finish off, and I call it Zoom University. I was finishing my undergrad degree online. And so I was sick of that, and then ended up in a master's program where I was online again. And so, I just wasn't buying into the charade. And about halfway through the semester, I was assigned this thesis paper in this drug discovery class. And I took that as an opportunity with like my critical thinking cap, put my critical thinking cap on. I watched Plandemic 2 and really went down the rabbit holes of how in itself was a plan. It was a scamdemic, essentially all propagated to get people to inject themselves with this toxic poison bomb, is what I'll say. And there was one night where I was just researching. We've all done it. I feel where you're like awakening to everything, and it started with the Rockefellers and starting the buying off the medical industry in like the early 1900s, and just how they got into cancer and everything else. And I went down the rabbit hole of, and I was still into the political realm a little bit. I thought that Trump is this savior almost. I was buying into that narrative a little bit. And so I was bawling my eyes out actually during my master's program one night, where I discovered that everything was fake. I discovered that I was in an industry that I did not agree with anymore. I wanted to get into drug discovery because I have a multi-system disorder called tuberous sclerosis complex that is a rare disease. We'll put disease in quotes. And ultimately I just was bawling my eyes out one night, and I went into my mom's room, and I'm like 22, 23 at the time. And I just was like, Mom, this is a huge charade. What are we doing? The mask is all about like shutting us up. It's all nonsense. And so that was what led to all of this. And then even since then, it's just been a gradual increase, because I was still into the viruses and everything else. I didn't fully wake up to virology being a scam up until probably a year or so after that. But that's definitely my red pill moment of just doing the late night research and really getting emotional over it is where something switched in me. I was like, this is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine, man, creating or attempting to create a career, a life around something, and then it blow up in your face, when you start learning the truth and digging into it. What would you say is the main reason that most stick with it? And maybe even those that are aware of it, but then they kind of just push through it. What do you think is keeping them in it?
Well, I'd say that, the powers that be are really good at programming people and indoctrinating people in the first place. So it is really hard for people to actually get to where I've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that money is a huge reason. Having a secure job, being part of society, following the line, just staying in line basically, and not being somebody that is a critical thinker and is thinking outside the box and questioning the ulterior mainstream narrative. It has a lot to do with money and a lot to do with just being programmed effectively by the powers that be. So I tip my cap to them, because they effectively have programmed the masses in more ways than one. So to get to this point at a young age, it's interesting, because a lot of people listen to me, but a lot of people also think I'm just a quack, and that I'm everything's a conspiracy. Well, once you see one thing, then you start questioning really everything. So definitely money. I mean, with my colleagues at Pfizer, they're dealing with that, having a secure job, and being afraid too, really having that fear of being wrong. That is really powerful as well. People are afraid to admit that they've been lied to. And I'm more than happy to admit that I've been lied to many, many times. And so, but I look back and, I was wearing a mask at Pfizer, and like it definitely stunk at the time. But I'm happy I graduated to, leaving there and really getting into the alternative media and seeing it through that lens as well. It's provided me an opportunity that a lot of people haven't had, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And just doing hard things leads to, I'm not going to say salvation, but I look back and I'm very happy with the fact that I didn't stay on the sidelines, and I'm able to call myself a whistleblower and somebody that is willing to fight for truth. And that's point blank why I'm here. That's my agenda, is the truth.
It's that warrior energy, compared to reality back in the day of warriors and going out into battle and physically protecting, their truth and their reality. We're doing that. I say we. I feel like the people that are willing to speak about truth and speak about what is obvious and obviously in front of them, and willing to be the bridges of communication, and like share and speak out your perspective.
Oh yeah.
Those are the warriors.
Important. I want to say something actually. One of the other red pill moments, and this is kind of full circle, is I am, really good friends with Alex Zek and his wife Kylie, and, huge follower of the way forward. You had Alec on, I believe, several years ago where he was sharing a story about his wife Kylie, and it just, that episode that you did caused a ripple effect inside of me to really also just question everything that's in the mainstream, question allopathic medicine, like the fact that Kylie was able to heal herself from, quote, autoimmune diseases
Mm-hmm.
is really powerful because, I have family members that have been, sucked into the industry and were taking prescription medications. And so I was persistent, with my sister actually getting her off of those long term. And she successfully has done that. It took her about 2 years to fully wean off of it, but it's incredible to, come full circle with you on something like that, where, you and Alec had an impact on me and my family that you didn't know who I am, but you caused a ripple effect. So, I wonder like what ripples I've caused in people, and that's definitely something that's unseen for the most part, but it is for sure a thing, and it's a reality.
Dude, I literally, my body just went into goosebumps. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And it really fills my heart. Like my heart just got 4 times bigger here. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And
for
I agree
sure,
with
dude.
you. I agree with you that there is ripples happening now. I would say waves are happening now. Maybe it was ripples back then, but now it's definitely starting to become these massive waves of truth and being, this willingness to speak out. And I'll also say, I feel like I was, it was either the first or the second episode for Alec on IG Lives. And so I want to be clear that we started that process together, and really we're just like trying to look for other people that were willing to talk about anything that was happening
Absolutely.
that wasn't part of mainstream. So thank you. I really appreciate that. That was good stuff, man.
No, thank you.
So you went from being, I feel like these last 4 years have just been a roller coaster. This is my perspective. It's been a massive roller coaster when it comes to mainstream narratives and the economy. You said it earlier. There's a lot of industries that are driven by money, for money, and not necessarily for the well-being of the individual, of the human element. So you graduated. You went to Project Veritas, to O'Keefe Media Group, and then you became a double agent, and then you did your own documentary, all in the last 3.5 years. Um, how was that for you? Like, how was that growth process like to be able to step into a willingness to speak? Because I feel like sharing your experience on what you went through to uh, overcome maybe the fears of speaking or the shame that usually comes from people that don't agree with you. How was that for you to get to this point?
It has been a roller coaster, like you said. I feel like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders actually for about 3 years. And,
Mm.
being, or maybe 2.5, from essentially being inside and wanting to be a whistleblower from the rip, right? I joined in March of 2021 as a formulation analytical scientist. So I was working directly on the mRNA, and I knowingly took this job where it was harming people, and God's
Mm.
law is do no harm. So I essentially made a promise that I wasn't going to stay on the sideline. So I had reached out actually to Project Veritas before even taking this role. And I essentially said, cause I saw them, as the truth in the media. Project Veritas means Project Truth
Mm-hmm.
in what is it? It's Latin, or, you know, Latin, I think, but
Yeah, it's Latin based, Veritas.
yes, absolutely. So I reached out to PV before I even took this job. And they said, Justin, that's amazing, but we can't tell you what to do at all. So I just took the job because I didn't really know what to do. I told my mom that I was going to look for work, as I was miserable during my master's program. And I just wanted to figure out if my degree was even going to be useful in the future. So I got offered this job in early March, and it took me 23 hours basically to accept this role. And I said yes just because I didn't want to stay on the sidelines. And during my entire time at Pfizer, it was like, Justin, you know that this is injuring people and killing people, and that's why I ended up reaching back out to Project Veritas and getting to work with their journalist team. It took me about 3 times actually to reach out to them. And then they finally came to the realization that I was working directly on the vaccine when I had, sent them a picture of the vials that I was working on. And I said, guys, I want to help. I'm a Pfizer insider. I want to be a whistleblower, like I have to do this for humanity, essentially, like I don't care if I die. I don't care if I sacrifice myself at this point. I know what I'm going to do is dangerous, but this is for the future generation. This, that's what this is all about. So I started working with them, and I worked with Project Veritas directly for about 3 months on the inside. And it was pretty wild, Otto, what I was able to uncover once I started working with them. These journalists were training me essentially to how to elicit information from my colleagues, asking the difficult question in ways that it was a bit sly in a way, where, eliciting information, you got to be friendly, but you also got to ask the hard question, and they call it pulling the trigger, so we can get into it. But I uncovered my manager, Conwall, essentially explaining how the vaccines were turning into a money game from the booster shots. And that was pretty bombshell from my perspective. And if the world had seen that in late 2021, who knows where we'd be in regards to injuries and death counts from this CV toxic poison bomb. And I mean, then Ramin Davari, her manager, I asked him about the booster shots as well, and had a real life situation where my mom's friend's mother had taken the booster shot, and the only one that was available was the shot. And she had passed away the same exact day, which,
Wow.
I mean, anyone who's a critical thinker and realizes that this is a worldwide clinical trial, and you hear that, wouldn't that raise some eyebrows? Wouldn't that, cause some concern? And in the conversation that I had with this guy, he said correlation does not equal causation, and it's not our jobs to really be concerned about that. The clinical people are concerned about that. And so it was just another, I don't know if he's dealing with cognitive dissonance or he knew that these vaccines were causing heart problems in people, but then he also came up with a metaphor for this and related it to chip companies, where I asked him, hey, does Pfizer get mad when other companies don't mandate the vaccine basically to be injected into people? And he said, well, do chip companies get mad when you talk bad about their chips? He's like, of course they do. And then explained that chip companies also engineer their chips in a way for people to keep on taking them again. And, chip companies know that these aren't, chips aren't healthy for people, but they're not openly marketing that. And so, if you wanted to jump into these clips that I have, to give background to the audience, I think since I'm talking about it, we can hop into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Justin has some clips that he wants to show us, some audio and some visual clips. For the visual ones, for those listening, make sure you check out the YouTube and actually watch it. But yeah, let's share the screen here and give you guys a glimpse into that.
You got it. All right, guys. Here is the clip of my manager Conwall Gill explaining to me how the booster shots essentially turned into a money game.
Conwall then goes on to say that the vaccine was not so effective, and says that the mRNA and LNPs are very sneaky.
Only Johnson & Johnson side effect came out quickly, that there was a clot that was happening. with Johnson and Johnson's.
Right.
But other than that, mRNA and LNP are very sneaky, I think. We are not still seeing a lot of huge complications.
She goes on to highlight how the clinical trials completely skipped normal clinical trials and went straight up, all at once, to phase 3.
But there are 3 types of trials, right? Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We just went straight up, right?
Yeah.
We just did this, but this is why it takes 10 years for a to come out.
Yeah.
It takes years of, observation, blah, 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 1, then 2 and 3. Here we are doing everything at the same time. So everybody is as puzzled.
Yeah.
Nobody has 100, even from CEO and even Ugo Sahin won't have answers. Because they are looking at it, closely watching it. At this point, that's all we can do. And I feel it's also becoming a money game.
So that was clip 1. I think that's pretty powerful with her saying, I think it's turning into a money game. And the CEO, Albert Bourla, and Ugur Sahin, who is the CEO of BioNTech, also have no idea what's going on. And so it's just extremely powerful. And I'll play the Ramin clip and then we can summarize his as well together.
Okay, go ahead. Wow, that was really powerful what she said.
There's more too in the documentary. I mean, that's a shorter version of her cut down. There's more. She explains how there's a 50-year conspiracy. Actually, she doesn't say conspiracy, but when you know what I know, it's a 50-year conspiracy where this mRNA technology couldn't get approved for over 50 years, and Moderna was working on this technology for over 10 years. And she says, quote, "We," meaning Moderna, used the emergency use in the pandemic to, quote, "get through it now." So it's wild. So here, I'll play this part with Ramin.
This is Ramin Davari, the formulation scientist from Pfizer, one of the head honchos of the formulation team. This clip was from October 21st, 2021. Just listen to what he has to say about the safety issues of the vaccine.
My mother called me 2 days ago and said that her therapist's friend told her that her friend took a booster shot and died the same day, I think, in her bathroom. I don't know if it was, but
the only booster shot so far is.
So I mean, well, it must have been Pfizer, and I'm just concerned that I mean, she was relatively old. She was 77 apparently, but I mean, it's kind of scary to me.
Well, that's the thing. People die every day.
I think it's something that we should look into and make sure that the boosters are
looking into it. It's just not our job to look into that.
Yeah.
But there are people within Pfizer, all the political people.
Okay.
And the safety people.
Right.
There are people who are not only looking at that, actually, there are reports that come to zillions of them every day.
Zillions.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think gets mad when they don't mandate it?
From a business perspective?
Yeah.
It's just like saying, you think the chips companies, they're going to get mad if somebody says chips is not good for you? Of course.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I mean,
they don't care if people just eat chips all day and die. Because their job is
to sell chips.
Engineering it the way that I take. No, it's not even selling it. It's for me to take it, basically, right? Because otherwise I won't buy it.
Right.
Yeah. So you forget about those parts of business, basically. So
yeah,
they're engineering it specifically for me to take the next one.
Right.
So increasing my consumption, guess what? It's going to affect my heart, and I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about that.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. People die every day.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, you tell me what you think. I mean, just based off of those 2 clips alone, which I got more bombshell material, and we'll get into what I was not able to actually reobtain. But I'm curious what you think about those. I mean, if people had seen that in late 2021, say November or December of 2021, do you think people would have continued to take the booster shots, or they would have started critically thinking and asking more questions?
Oof. I'm the interviewer. Why am I? No. I'll say this, man. I think we, as a collective, underestimate their ability to, program and to create the reality where the individual feels safe. I was just having this discussion with Alec last night, actually, that we believe that these systems are playing on the two types of children, the obedient child and the rebel child. And they will create the narrative to make both sides feel safe, but still under that control of that narrative. And I'll say this too. I think one of the biggest things that is the cause of a lot of the destruction that's happening to the human element in this reality is something called fiduciary responsibility. When you give the power to corporations to provide health-based solutions, do you really think that they're going to think about the health impact when they have fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders? Probably not. So yeah, I mean, those videos are amazing. I mean, I think that just clearly shows where, the mindset is of the mainstream narrative, which is, it's just like, well, people die every day. Well, compared to a chip company, which is the funniest comparison. It's a normalized, push. It's like, it is what it is. Here it is. What can I do? That's not my job. And that was his answer, right? That's not my job.
Pretty much. But I mean, he was a head honcho in formulations. And so I'd like to, preface and give context that I was 23 years old at the time when I was working with Project Veritas, and I was way too trustworthy with them. I'm not the biggest computer geek in the world. It took me a while to really even figure out how to use these cameras that they provided me in the first place. And so I was handing off these SD cards every single day that I was working in person directly with a journalist, and was just willingly giving them to this person, not really batting an eye, saying, oh, I should be backing these up. It maybe crossed my mind like once or twice, but I didn't actually do that, so I was very naive and way too trustworthy because, looking back, if I had a time machine, I would have just backed everything on myself and, more than likely released all of this. But I also this is why I had to go work at Project Veritas to reobtain that footage. I had nothing when I resigned from, and I basically, to get into the most bombshell from my perspective footage that I had gotten was, I sat down with the vice president. His name is Nick Warren, and he is VP of Research and Development and Pharmaceutics and Sciences. He's got a really long job title. He was at this emergency use authorization meeting for the 5 to 11-year-old approval, right? The approval for 5 to 11-year-olds. And it was dated October 26th of 2021. And I set up a meeting with this guy the following week. And I had watched a majority of this 8-hour long YouTube video, it was public, but this information that I am whistleblowing on is not exactly public knowledge, especially not at the time, where Nick and then there's a senior vice president by the name of Dr. Bill Gruber, who explained that that was approved for kids for 5 to 11-year-olds, the clinical trials that were done was done in phosphate buffer saline, which can only be stored at minus 80 degrees Celsius. Where the shadiness comes in is that the actual approval happened for the tris buffer formulation. So they changed the final step in the buffer system that is used in the vaccine en masse. And so they came together with the FDA and said that it's okay to do this bioequivalence substitution because we just think that tris is going to be better for the long term, because with tris you can store it at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius after itself has thawed out. And so the logic behind that is, well, how many pharmacies and hospitals and these like pop-up rollout clinics that they had everywhere have minus 80 degrees Celsius freezers. So they were doing the clinical work on a formulation that was only for minus 80 degrees Celsius. And they approved one that didn't go into the arms of kids at all. I mean, come on, would even the non-vaccine hesitant parents maybe have batted an eye and said, oh, wow, this is pretty crazy. I mean, I'm going to inject my child with a vaccine that hasn't been tested at all, regardless of whether viruses exist or not in this conversation. I mean, this is just something that is an overarching huge red flag from my perspective. Even, being 23 years of age, first job out of college, I thought this was massive. And he told me that he essentially gamed the FDA when I asked him about the clinical trials and, why they didn't do it for this tris buffer. And they said, well, you gotta kind of game the FDA, where they were in a huge rush to get this approved for their emergency use authorization. And so that was also something that I had obtained on the inside. So that, on top of the other two videos that you just watched, were probably the three most powerful pieces that I had obtained. And James O'Keefe and Project Veritas came to the conclusion that this was not worth releasing. This was not public information. And the risk was essentially too high, because they said that I was breaking the law, and they essentially aided and abetted me breaking the law by providing me these cameras in a state that is a two-party consent recording state. So I had no idea about recording consent laws until they told me 3 months into working with them, which is heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching. And, my heart was broken, and I, was naive. I didn't know about recording consent law, and they should have been way more open about that fact that, oh, by the way, Justin, you are not exactly doing this in a legal way. And we could get into the legal versus lawful conversation where this is exposing crimes.
This is the weird part about this whole situation with him. They were extremely established by that point. They had the legal backing and the people that knew this information. Why would they even support you and give you the cameras and put you out there to do this if they didn't know that in the first place? Something changed.
That's the thing. No, they knew that. They knew what I was doing 100% every single step of the way. And I've corroborated that in my documentary from the journalist that I was working directly with. He said that the lawyers knew exactly what you were doing every single step of the way, and they pulled the rug last minute. I got to the finish line essentially with this massive story, and they're like, oh, sorry, Justin, we're not going to tell your whistleblower story, but you're so good at undercover work that we want to hire you. We think that you can help us. And I was baffled. I met James O'Keefe in Hartford, Connecticut at the Capitol Grill. They spent like $700 on a dinner on me to convince me that we can't tell your story and that you should join our side still. And so I drove home, was bawling my eyes out, and I was pissed, basically. It was all out of my control. I had given all of this information to them, didn't back any of it up, and I just was beating myself up. And that is what the weight that I had to deal with, and keep this to myself forever. They offered me a job to stay silent on a matter of crimes against humanity. And I didn't really know what to do, Otto. I wanted to potentially move to another Pfizer campus to do it again, but there was no going back. It's not like I have a time machine and I could just, reobtain those quotes. I had to do something about it. And so I stayed at Pfizer for about 4 more months, and I decided to take this job as an undercover journalist at Project Veritas and look at them through a lens that nobody else would, but also, still do good for humanity doing undercover journalism, as it's really important work from my perspective, if done the right way, and you're not looking for clickbait stories and narratives, which we can also get into, because I ended up, in a matter of like 8, 9, 10 months, I got the biggest story at Project Veritas, the directed evolution, Jordan Tristan Walker, mutating story. I was the journalist who obtained that story for James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, effectively making them like
Wow.
900. I made them like $900,000 in donations in a week. And I think that story gained like 2 million in donations in about a month. So, I mean, that was the biggest story that they had ever done. And little do the masses know that, it got 50 million views on Twitter in a month, which is pretty unheard of. It's one of the most viewed Twitter posts, Twitter stories ever. And
Wow.
it was done by me. And I'm out here also a terrain model guy, where I actively was sitting down with this. He was, Jordan Tristan Walker's job title was Director of mRNA Scientific Planning. So he had the ins and outs of, he was actually in consulting and marketing. So he really knew how to push this thing. And I don't know, out of the blue, he just started talking about how it was mutating in our first meeting, and I'm a straight guy, by the way. So it was also really difficult to learn how to do undercover journalism when you're sitting across from someone that, is gay and like wants to get in your pants, basically. It was really, it's a traumatizing thing that I had to go through. And I'm still ultimately like recovering from that part of my life too, because like I didn't want to do those things, but I was doing a job, and excuse me, ultimately this story created an opportunity for me that I call, it's rapport building with James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, because this story ultimately is what allowed me to re-obtain the footage that we just went over with Conwall and Remain. So it was a blessing in disguise, but I was also really struggling internally because this story got so big and so massive. And like I had connected with Alec actually prior to doing that story. And then after that story was released, Alec reached out to me. He's like, bro, is this you? I'm like, yes. And I know that what you're going to say, like, this is a dangerous story. Like from my perspective, it's a dangerous story. And Alec and I agreed that it was affirming the viral mutation narrative, gain of function or gain of fiction narratives that were out there, especially in the alternative media world, right? That's what was playing out in real time. And to me, my heart was broken from it, but I just had to keep moving forward. And so something really switched in me right after this, where it was like, I really need to start corroborating what has happened to me. And because it was a 180 of my truth. I'm a whistleblower, but in reality, I was an undercover journalist, and I did a massive story that reaffirms germ theory, and I was a terrain guy. So my head was spinning every single day of my life, basically.
Wow. Was that, just to kind of recap and summarize, that was when you were with Project Veritas or with OMG?
That was when I was with Project Veritas still. That was the biggest story that, I did for them. I stayed with them for about 3 or 4 months after that. And I did a story on DEI and, diversity, equity, inclusion, and that being pushed for like the LGBTQ agenda. I did a story in Long Island where there's, they were calling it a cabal of like assistant superintendents and teachers basically getting together and taking advantage of this free professional development program called EdCamp. So I stayed at PV actually until that story came out. And then I resigned immediately because I went to go to O'Keefe Media Group because I still needed access to James. And he had left PV because of the whole board, I call it fiasco or a charade, like the whole thing. I'm not really.
What is your opinion? Yeah. What is your opinion on what happened there, and why he was kicked out?
I go back and forth on the whole thing. At this point in time, I personally feel like both sides, like James and the board, were kind of in on the whole thing. And the underlying details, I'm not fully aware of why it happened that way, but there's underlying details like a senior producer, actually, Callan Erickson, who I used to work with. He went on a podcast called Dangerous Rhetoric, and he was on there for like 3+ hours. And from his perspective, from participating and just knowing James, he was a producer at Project Veritas for 3 years. So he basically said that James was not able to maintain accountability and hold himself accountable. He, got reamed during this board meeting that was like 6 hours long, and he wasn't able to own up to the fact that he made mistakes. But to me, I also feel like the board is in on the destruction of Veritas as well. I look at both sides, and I think both sides really played a part. And the overarching question is just why. And I don't have that answer necessarily, but it came right on the heels of this story. So, the fact maybe they were wanted to hide the fact that they had hired a scientist who was a whistleblower and done all of this other stuff behind the scenes. And, we didn't even touch on this, but I had also done some really dangerous work where I provided Project Veritas the vials of the shot. And
I saw that in the beginning of your documentary. It showed like blood without the poke and then blood with it, and it was all coagulated.
There was blood, and then we also were just looking at the vials, what was in the vacuum without anything on just a light microscope. I think it was a light microscope, and it was really horrific what we saw. And so there was like black and purple shards that looked like spider webs almost. And this is where the technology of what we're dealing with comes into play. Of Carrie Madej was calling it Tesla phoresis when she went on.
I did an interview with her in 2020, end of 2020, where she specifically talked about her experience in the 90s, late 90s, where she was in I guess it was like a military. It was part of the military, or I don't know if she was a part of military herself, but they were talking about this new nanotechnology that they were working on at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it's this self-assembling carbon nanotubule technology, essentially, which, I'm not affirming anything necessarily. This is just how I look at it. And my hypothesis is that there's something going on with this Tesla phoresis carbon nanotubule technology that is, it uses graphene oxide. So it's rumored that graphene is in these shots. I don't necessarily have proof of that, but just based off of the fact that there are embalmers around the world pulling these massive white clots out of people's necks and people's legs and groins, and people are just dying suddenly. Athletes are dying suddenly all over the world. You just have to beg the question, like, what is this technology that went into people en masse? And so that's what we were dealing with here. And I forget where I was going with that point, but that was also something that PV kept hidden, I remember. So that happened a week and a half prior to Project Veritas getting raided by the FBI, where this FBI raid had to do with Ashley Biden's diary, which was a story that they were investigating over a year prior. So you mean to tell me that the FBI is going to raid PV for this diary situation that they were investigating a year prior, versus Carrie Madej went on Stu Peters' show, and this video that they did together garnered hundreds of thousands of views within a week. So a week and a half after they get raided, and there's no mention of the fact that they're working with a whistleblower in real time, that's working to expose crimes against humanity. So that's where I just look at this overarching conspiracy, and then, I hop over to O'Keefe Media Group, and it just, the business model didn't really make sense. James was all about, pushing this citizen journalism where, the journalists that he brought over from Project Veritas were trained. So we did like 3 stories, and then he just really stopped sending us out. And the whole thing was just nuts, because I had provided him two whistleblowers, one from the FDA and one on Twitter, actually. And James has a really good relationship with Elon Musk. And there is this story with my friend Raymond Bouchard, who he exposes child endangerment essentially on this Twitter platform, where if you change the search settings to make it so that it's just an open search forum, you can find child pornography and you'll definitely find pornography, but you'll also find potential child porn or something very close to that. I mean, Raymond has screenshots up the wazoo about all of this. And so, pay attention to his story too. It's called Clean Twitter Now. So, I called the documentary Project Whistleblower because I'm not the only whistleblower. There's Kim Witzak also has an incredible story, but in the mean of time, I'll save it for the audience to go figure out her story as well. But all of that just adding on top of my shoulders, like, okay, this story with Raymond, they sat down for 40 minutes in an in-person interview. I drove Raymond all the way to meet James in person, and James was just really not into his story. And I thought he was going to release it, but Raymond immediately said there's no way that he is going to tell this story. He just seemed disinterested. James was pulling out his phone during the interview, like acting just, I'm
not interested.
Not interested, we'll say. Was somewhat disrespectful from being there in real time. And so that all added together, and then boom, early July, I start hearing rumors about James attending the Bohemian Grove. And that is where my eyebrows, just like yours, raised. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to be joking me. Like, we got the king of investigative journalism getting invited to the secret society Bohemian Club. That's what we're dealing with here.
You don't get invited if you're not a part of the club. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well,
what is your opinion on James with all your experiences with him and knowing him going to that event? And do you have any other information?
I mean, to me, it's pretty clear as day that he is somebody out there who is supposedly acting like a freedom fighter and somebody that is fighting for the rest of the world. And don't get me wrong, James has woken up a lot of people, but he also lulls them back to sleep, in the sense that he is, I call him like a system journalist, in a sense that he's not asking the critical, deep questions that we discuss, things like music and sky, right? Like sovereignty and, exiting the system completely with status correction and, not paying taxes, et cetera, like, or even the fact that viruses don't exist. Like, he is very much like sucked into all of that as well. And that is something that I call the mainstream alternative media. And then I add industrial complex. I believe David Icke has coined that term, the mammoth, where these right-wing conservative talking heads are the new mainstream media, essentially, for the critical thinkers. And they are there to, you're only allowed to question like this much. You can't question past Alex Jones. You can't question past James O'Keefe. So that's what their role is, essentially. And that's why I believe that James was invited. And after I released my documentary, this isn't in the documentary, but I was told from an old colleague from O'Keefe Media Group that Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk were also in attendance. So just makes you wonder. Like, it's all one big club and we ain't in it. That's the way I look at all of it. And so, and I also look at the Bohemian Club, Bohemian Grove attendees as essentially foot soldiers for the overarching powers that be and the controllers that are unseen. Like, we don't not exactly know. Like, is it the Rockefellers? Is it the Rothschilds? Who's above them? It's probably the people above them. So it's really a lot to digest. But did you want me to throw on the Bohemian Grove mission?
I was about to say, if you can. Justin has a clip here that we're going to show. on the whole James O'Keefe at Bohemian Grove from his documentary, right?
Yes, sir. It's actually right at the beginning. It's like the first thing that you hear, and then it's kind of a teaser for the rest of it. So this is actually a really powerful conversation. It's a long clip, so it's about 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap up our thoughts. Alrighty, guys. So this is a direct clip from the documentary where James O'Keefe admits to me that he went to Bohemian Grove, and it is an all-encompassing conversation where I reveal myself as, this double agent, sticking up for myself essentially from being a whistleblower. So it's contextually from a 40-minute conversation that I have and put into bits and pieces. So hope you guys enjoy it.
Gathering at the Grove. Prior to his trip, I set out to corroborate my story completely as best as I could. On August 1st, I obtained a photo of James O'Keefe's tent slip next to his book, American Muckraker, when I was at his house in North Vale, New Jersey. Carrot Top hooked me up by throwing the tent slip directly in my direction while I was working, and I proceeded to take a picture of it when I went to go to the bathroom. Finally, on August 23rd, James O'Keefe came clean to me and called me saying,
I went to this Bohemian club and it's upset people. So I just wanted to hear from you and kind of take your temperature and see how you're feeling, see how you're doing, like what's going through your mind.
James, how did you even get invited there? And it's the most powerful secret society in the world.
I feel like my own team is like eliciting me and challenging me and questioning me. And I think I was just a guest. I didn't see anything wrong there. Some of our people that I've known for many years were there. If I saw something, I would tell you, but I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories and stuff, and I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything that crossed the line or, anything like that. Some strange things, but nothing like what's portrayed by like Alex Jones or anyone else, as far as I can see. And there's a lot of people that support us that are involved in that. Some people on this team are really challenging me in a fundamental way, and it's really more than I can take right now. So I just need to know, like, are you with me? Are you, and just tell me the truth, like.
Truthfully, James, I can't say yes to that because of everything that we've been through from Whistleblower to now.
I can't feel like my own team is like investigating me. You have to trust me. It sounds like you're not.
I called James back that day and I wanted to bring up to him more about my story being buried and how this was truly a crime against humanity.
You want to continue our conversation?
Sure thing. James, you advised it, and it wasn't even my decision to go about it this way. It was a manipulative tactic.
I thought about the tape again after the February. I thought about revisiting it, but a lot of people said it's a few years old. It's a little old. It's probably not advisable to do it. Our attorney advised us not to look at that footage. And I think it's important that we listen to our attorneys who are trying to help us and keep us out of trouble. There are certain lines that we just can't cross. Certain lines that I can't cross. I wouldn't advise that you cross.
I mean, it's been a lot, and it was like the golden ticket, Willy Wonka of whistleblowers. Literally, codename Microscope. I literally showed people like the nanotechnology in this shot, James, like the bioweapon behind it. Why don't we do an interview together on how fucked up the whole thing was?
Because you just said that I'm trying to extort you, and you've crossed. You can't. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
You know, I've been through a lot in the sense that, like, I come from being a whistleblower, right? I wanted to blow the whistle on this bioweapon, and you shut me up.
Right?
You shut me up.
Who shut you up?
You did.
Who shut you up?
I was silenced by you, sir. Regarding how I was a source, remember how I came to you, wanted to blow the whistle on the whole thing?
What would cause all of the people, all of your former colleagues, to caution you to release that? Why would they caution you to release that?
Probably because they don't want the truth to get out, because of all the powerful information behind it all. It's way too powerful, such as the Vice President Nick Warren saying he gamed the system, gamed the FDA, telling us not public information. Millions of people died, James, from this shot. The moral, ethical thing to do is bypass these things on paper, written laws, that don't actually matter. God's law is what matters, sir.
Shoo.
Pretty wild.
I hadn't heard that recording. Holy moly. That's some serious stuff.
Definitely the wildest conversation that I've probably ever had. And it was really hard, really difficult, but it was also, something that I look back on and, I can pat myself on the back for ultimately sticking up for myself because, I mean, Otto, that conversation happened like a day or two after I went to Music and Sky last year. So I went to M&S, I met Mike Winter, I met Alec, and
you were on fire, right? You were like, nope.
Yes, bro. I was right off of PTO. I took, 3 or 4 days off total, just flying out there and, the weekend vacation as well. But I was right off of talking to Mike and talking to Alec and meeting Amanda and all these amazing people and telling them my story. And it dawned on me that this is your moment, Justin, to really stick up for yourself and get back on I call it your divine axis of, that's what I was doing this entire time throughout this journey of switching from the 180 to being upright and center within my divine axis, essentially. And so that's what that call really was about. And, I know what I've done, essentially speaking out against not only, but against James O'Keefe, the alternative media, is dangerous. But I'm okay with that, because I am looking out for future generations and looking to cause, like we were talking prior to, ripples causing waves. That is what this mission that I was on and am still on is about, and speaking truth, because I love the quote, truth is love and love is truth. If it's not truth, then it's not love. And if it's not love, then it's not truth. And that really hit me when I heard that quote over a year ago, that, you have to stand in truth no matter what, no matter how hard it is, because if you can plant seeds in people, especially if you have an audience, then that is the most important thing, because the seeds inevitably should grow. Not saying every seed that you plant is going to grow, but if you keep planting seeds, then, we might not see the trees grow from the seeds that we've planted, but that's okay, because the future generations will get to enjoy these trees of the seeds that we're growing. And, so that's how I look at this mission, that we may not ultimately see the reward or what society's going to look like in 3-4 generations when, you and I are like 100 something and, generations down the road. But that is,
I don't know about you. I plan to live to 150, so I'll be here.
Yeah, that's a record, right? That's the oldest person ever.
Yeah, man. I completely agree with you. I think that, I am optimistic that things are happening fairly quickly now. It feels like, compared to where we've been in the last 30 years or so. So I am hopeful that we will see major changes in our lifetime. But I agree, we won't really see the full resolution of this transition ourselves. It'd be our kids and our children's children. So that's what I agree. That's what we fight for. We're fighting for the longevity of truth and, being able to feel freedom and the ability to be interdependent, self-accountable with each other in a heart-based way. The society that has been normalized, that we've all been born into, has just been destructive up until this point, and we need to make change. Man, Justin, you're amazing, man. I really appreciate everything you've done and everything you've accomplished so far. If you're listening to this and you want to connect with Justin and watch his documentary, Project Whistleblower, you can go to his website, justintegrity.net. So that's JUSTIN as in Nancy, TEGRITY.net. Or you can find him on Instagram. He's at justin.leslie3, as well as at Justintegrity. So it's all together. Justin and Integrity.
_ on X.
And on X, yeah, at Justintegrity _.
Yep.
So a few more questions here and we can wrap it up. So with everything that you've experienced, everything that has happened when it comes to the medical industry, the education you've gotten after you graduated, where do you see reality going in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years when it comes to medicine?
Great question. I have hope that it's somewhat of a domino effect where, the people that maybe got coerced into taking this and are willing to admit that they were wrong for taking it, and maybe even are willing to learn about virology itself being a complete farce, that we are, causing the ripples to waves to get back into holistic healing modalities, whether that is with naturopaths, whether that's through massage therapy or acupuncture or sound healing. Actually, those are the new healing modalities of the future from my perspective. And, I'm gifted to have a mother who practices massage and practices sound therapy. So I got introduced to all of this at a very not young age, but, in my 20s is when she started doing sound therapy. And I see that as the way that we can heal, and just completely turning away from this allopathic medicine, petroleum-based medicine model, that the Rockefellers, the oil giants captured the medical industry. Well, they are losing their grip. And in the next 3, 5, 10 years, I think that the people that are speaking out right now, such as Amanda Vollmer, yourself, Alec, Alec's not a doctor, but he knows a lot about health. I've learned a lot about health. I've experimented on my body with fasting, and doing water fast, doing dry fast, doing, dare I say it, urine therapy.
I was about to say it. Same, bro. Same. I'll say it. I've been doing urine enemas.
See, I don't drink pee every day, but, I've done it before. And, I see that, I think Certified Health Nut on Instagram, he's talked about how it's
Troy Casey. Yeah.
He's talked about how it's actually a feedback loop that our body gives us. And, we can be like, oh, I've had too much coffee, or I've had too much this or too much that. And so, it's just really taking back that part of us, taking back that part of we can heal ourselves. We don't need to outsource to an entire industry that profits off of us being sick. Like it's really ludicrous to think that we've gotten this far in the sense of generational traumas of being lied to. That's how I look at all of this is, they captured the industry in the early 1900s and it's 100 years. So that's 3 or 4 plus generations that have been lied to and been sucked into taking, and not just, but I mean, even ibuprofen and, Tylenol, and getting into amoxicillin, antibiotics, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on for hours about this, but the overarching theme is that we've been lied to, and the generations before us have been lied to. So we also, as young men, we need to be gracious towards, my parents, and especially our grandparents. Like, I don't know if the boomers are fully going to get there, maybe not in this lifetime, probably the next, where, they realize what happened and that they actually allowed this type of corruption to play out, but that's how we also learn, so that's the way I see it. I think that there's going to be probably holistic hospitals and things of that nature. And, the only way we're going to be using allopathic medicine in the future, hopefully, is for like trauma emergency reasons, emergency surgeries, and, boom, shoot them with lidocaine because we need to patch this guy up from a car accident. Like, there is that
Western
1%.
medicine. Yeah. Western medicine for trauma is the best. I'll give them that. But when it comes to chronic illness, chronic disease, chronic whatever, that's where they keep you in. That's where you become a return customer.
Yes, sir.
And if you guys haven't watched this this interview on Alex's podcast, The Most Important Project of the Century, The End of Virology, The Truth About Bird Flu with Jamie Andrews and Jacob Diaz, it is mind-blowing. Definitely recommend watching it, and just gives you a little bit more in-depth view on the narrative about viruses and like what they actually are.
Yeah, and the phases 3 and 4 are like getting into debunking genetics and using the PCR test for all of this. So, I mean,
they're dismantling the industry one episode at a time.
Yes,
it's amazing.
I'm working on that project with them, actually, as behind the scenes. So we'll see how involved I can get. I might be able to hopefully, come out of the bullpen and use my science skills again. We'll see. There's no promises made here, but I hope that maybe that comes to fruition.
Love it. So I do have to ask this question because we're a crypto show. What is your perspective on crypto and blockchain? Have you gone into it? Have you any perspective on it?
I definitely have gone a little back and forth of like, oh, is crypto good? Is crypto bad? Is it, are they just trying to capture us essentially into, I made a note on the show. I wanted to talk about decentralized finance with crypto with you. I'm not sure if you're fully tapped into that. And
DeFi.
DeFi. The overarching way I look at crypto right now is blockchain technology is the way of the future. And it is something that BlackRock and all of these larger companies are obviously buying into it now with their ETFs and everything. So I think that it's obviously the way of the future, and it's going to be the new currency is the way I look at it. They're just looking to come up with some narrative essentially to get away from the dollar. So I see it as the way of the future. Blockchain technology is very important in a way of the future. But I'm actually really, really interested in DeFi itself, because the way I look at like Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of them right now, and even the stock market too, like in general, we are in what's called an everything bubble, where the economy isn't necessarily doing that well, but the stock market's at an all-time high. Bitcoin, Ethereum are at all-time highs. So it wouldn't shock me if we're in for a massive correction. Not saying that, Bitcoin is a scam or Ethereum's a scam. I'm not saying that. I think in the time of this recording, we are due for some sort of correction, and the energy is going to potentially plummet. And that's where I think DeFi actually comes in, where, DeFi could start picking up more. So I'm curious, Otto, I need to learn more about DeFi and really get involved in it. I'm not invested into it right now. But I think that it's also a huge part of the future, in the sense that what I know about it is that like you can buy some Ethereum and then put it into, what is it, like a MetaMask wallet or something, or
in your own bank. So let me give you a little bit of a rundown so you can just get a little bit of my perspective. it's a tool. Okay. The idea, which is blockchain, is a tool. And in all tools in this reality, it can be used for good, it can be used for evil. The tool is not necessarily evil, it's who is wielding it, right? And so, yes, it will be used for evil. Like, that is just the nature of this current public sector reality. And one of the things that I try to teach in my academy is to become aware of the game with crypto right now. Right now, they're really pushing the same narratives and traditional banking concepts with all the other securities and assets that exist, like stocks and commodities. And so most people come into the space and they speculate, they day trade, they stare at the price of the thing rather than looking at the value of it. The intrinsic, built-in, fundamental value, and that's the trap. It keeps you in war, right? In war with each other. Because that's what day trading is somebody needs to lose for you to win. And then it creates division. So I'm glad you brought up DeFi. DeFi allows you, crypto in general, when you get your own wallet, you become a bank. You have now your own server in an ecosystem that is not going through a central party authority, right? So because you become your own bank, DeFi was kind of popped into place in the last, I'd say, 6 years or so, 5 or 6 years, maybe more now. I forgot that we're like in 2024, probably 8 years now. And it allows you to do the same services and products that banks can do without having to have an MSB license, a money service business license. So lending, borrowing, there's even more gamified ways, fractionalized lending, liquidity providing into markets. And that creates true passive income. So that's the difference between speculation versus utilization, actually using the product to build your business, to build your wealth, to protect it generationally. Does that make sense?
Yep, that does actually.
That was my elevator pitch.
I need to do more, book work and studying on it all, but I'm excited to I'm not in it right now, but I put it in the show notes because I recently have just learned about it. So it's good to have this conversation with you and get educated a little bit.
Yeah, we can definitely connect and talk more about it. I have no problem in sharing more about it with you. Okay,
awesome,
so
brother.
One last question here and we'll wrap it up. You're standing in front of millions of people. You have 90 seconds to leave them with a piece of advice, life advice, whatever you want to say. What is it that you leave them with?
That's incredible. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Leslie. Thank you for listening to the show with Otto. And, for the millions that are listening, theoretically, I just want to share my message of truth and love with the world and have everyone, maybe be able to try and put their feet in my shoes and come from a place of empathy and understanding that I'm not perfect by any means, but by all means possible. My code name was BAM. By all means is what it stood for. And that's what my mission is about. By all means, waking as many people up as possible, if you're willing to listen and really get into the newer generations learning to unlearn the indoctrination and programming that is fed to us in education and media and in health, and getting into that oneness and that internal knowing and realizing that God is within us and that we are all extremely powerful. We all essentially have superpowers and we're able to create our reality, and our consciousness is so strong, and that if collectively we're able to cause ripples to waves, and we don't have to agree on everything either. I'm not asking everyone to agree with me on certain things, but just I hope that the audience can understand that I'm here to spread truth and love, and my only agenda is the truth, and to just continue exploring and trailblazing, because I've gone down that trailblazing path. So there's no turning back at this point. So I love you guys, and I know that's my message. Just continue telling the truth, no matter what, no matter how hard it is, because if you don't, that means you're going to be lying to yourself, and then you're lying to the person in front of you. Might not be the easiest thing to do, but truth is love, man. And that's it, brother.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you, Justin. Hats off to you. I commend you for the work you're doing. Keep doing it. You have the support of those that are in like mind with you and me. You know, you have
Yes,
my
sir.
support here, brother. Always,
Otto,
anytime you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me on. I really appreciate you, brother. Love you so much.
Love you too, brother. Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching and listening. And last but not least, always remember, gamify your abundance. Love you guys.